So welcome. If you don't know me, I'm Katie. I run an online program called HD School. I work with human design. I do readings. I still refer to myself as a coach, although I don't generally coach people right now. I'm more focused on HD School, but I love teaching human design, and that's what I do. I think it's funny sometimes. I have a business degree, so it's like if you told me 10 years ago this is what I was going to be doing, I would be like, I don't think so. That doesn't sound like me. But I stumbled across human design almost 4 years ago now, and here I am. I love it. So yeah, not too long ago, when I was before my human design time, I was exhausted. I was totally burnt out. I was uninspired. I was unmotivated. I was in a marriage that sucked. I was lost. I felt like I had no purpose. I felt like I really had nothing to offer the world, to be honest. And I knew I had a lot of work to do on myself, but I didn't know where to start. I very much contemplated giving up this whole like dream I had of having an amazing life that I loved and felt good. And I was like, maybe I just stay in this job that I hate and I don't know, make money and die or something, right? Maybe that's just what life is like. Patricia says I can relate. Yeah, I'm sorry that you can relate. The same with you, Gwen, but a lot of people I think can. And then, through my whole description there, I was evidently being a total victim and being really powerless to a lot of things that I could actually do to help myself and move myself forward. And I was jumping all over the place, trying to find all of these solutions outside of myself and really just feeling like crap. So, yeah, my apologies to everyone who says that they feel like this is relatable, but I know so many people relate to this, which is why I share it because I think you know, there's just so much possibility in human design and transformation and making things easier, except evidently this week for me. But usually, there's a lot less resistance. Um, and so not following my design kept me angry and stuck for basically my whole life. And what human design really has to do with this is it gave me tangible tools and steps and places to focus to make major upgrades to my life. Everything felt impossible for me for uh, most of my life, really, 30 years. And I learned all these strategies from experts. I literally spent almost $30,000 on coaching and courses and all of these things. And it really just left me exhausted and hustling and fantasizing. I'm not joking. I wish I was. I fantasized for like a couple of years about being in a coma because I was so burnt out. I was like, maybe I'd be like walking down the street one day and I would like trip and fall and hit my head and I would go into a coma. And then, like, in a week, I would wake up and I'd be so rested and hydrated. And like, that's not normal. Um, so I really just felt like something was wrong with me. And let me know if you can relate to any of that. I know quite a few of you already said that you can. But human design really helped me to see my strengths and my purpose and to see how we're designed differently. So it's one of my favorite things when it comes to the whole curse of comparison, because I know what my design is. And I can look at other people and it's like, yeah, you're doing you, you're living your design, and that's not mine. And that's beautiful. So it really has helped me to release a lot of that comparison and also understand the bigger picture of my life and understand how my energy works and how to make good decisions. So within 2 months of finding human design, I left my husband and got a divorce. I moved back from California back to Toronto, where home is for me. I started a totally new life, a new job. I got the most amazing partner, and almost 4 years later, he's still my favorite person. So, really so much has changed. And I found out about human design at that point, but I didn't really implement it. And so I mentioned this because although there was a major shift and really helped a lot of things in my life to shake things up, I got laid off and I blew through my savings. I had no direction. I was trying to copy everyone else around me and what they were doing to try to get some sort of success in my life. I had to borrow money from my parents to pay my rent at one point. I got depressed and I started having panic attacks for the first time in my life. And I share this just because human design is great and it's really something to experiment with and to use in your life. It's not just about knowing. There's definitely a level of transformation that comes from knowing, but it's really something that is designed to be experimented with. And the more you experiment, the more you can really see if it's right for you or not, right? I'm not here to push human design by any means. I think it's incredible. It's done so much for my life, and it's all about experimenting and seeing how it works for you. So I went back to human design. I really started implementing it. I got to know myself super well. I began experimenting with my strategy and my authority, which honestly took me probably a year to really get like in my body. And these days, you know, three and a few months, 3 years and a bit later, I'm happier, I'm healthier, I'm wealthier. I have clarity on my purpose. My unexplained health issues, which I used to have so many of, went away. I'm making more money than I ever did in my so-called career. And I know where my Achilles heel is, and I can support myself. So, you know, this week with all this stuff that's been popping up, I'm like, right, I need to rest, Katie. I've been going at it a little bit too hard. There's all these things that are popping up. And so when things aren't flowing, it's like, right, right, right. I know that things are easy for me. And when it's not easy, it's a really good sign that I need to slow things down or change things up. So that's what I'm going to be doing. So my goals have been happening so much more easily. And after 3 years of trying to start a business, I started getting clients immediately. Elisa says, yes, please. Can I order all of the above? 100%, 100%. I believe you can. So your goals may be different. You know, I always kind of joke about this. I hope you don't have a spouse to divorce. It's not the most fun thing to do in the moment, although great results. I'm all for it when it's the right decision to make. Trust your strategy or authority, rather. But I really believe that your life is waiting for you. And I know that human design, in my experience and in so many of the experiences of the people that I work with, really is something that can be so transformational. So today, let's dive in. We're getting into the arrows and really what we're going to be going through in the class today, because there's so much to go into with the arrows, is definitely going to be more of an overview. So we're going to do an overview of the arrows. We're going to talk about the variable grid, because sometimes I feel like it is a nightmare to look at. So hopefully I'll be able to break it down to make it a little bit easier when you're understanding it yourself. We're going to talk about leftness and rightness, as well as the 4 arrows and breaking them down individually. So for an overview, does that all sound good, by the way? Let me know how you're feeling. When we're looking at the human design body graph, it's going to be something like this. And depending on what software you use, you're going to see arrows by the head. There's going to be 4 arrows, 2 on each side, 2 red ones or something similarly colored to that, and then 2 darker ones, 2 black ones. And this is, you know, from mybodygraph.com. This is from my version of Genetic Matrix. So it has a little bit more going on underneath there. We don't need to go into that yet. And if you don't have a chart that has your arrows, just because I got some messages on Instagram about this, one of the easy ways to get it is if you go to mybodygraph.com and click on my body graphs. So up here, as opposed to talking body graph, that will load the part of your body graph that has the arrows, because the initial one won't. So in the event you don't have a chart that has the arrows on it, that's an easy, free way to get it. So what are the arrows? Human design, generally speaking, is about the sort of map more so to our body and our energy and how we move through life physically, in our form, in our vehicle, as human design calls it. And the arrows are really a map to our awareness. So Gwen's just asking, do variable hinge on super accurate birth data, or can you get close on a birth time and still get accurate variables? It really depends. You need to be within a half an hour, generally speaking, of the correct birth time. And again, it just totally depends on a million things. I'll talk about it a little bit more when we go into a later part, but you can play around with it. Let's say if I was doing a reading for someone today and they knew that their birth time was between 9 and 9:30 a.m. And for them, the arrows happened to stay the same for the entire, for that entire period. But I'm pretty sure the maximum time that the 4 arrows are going to stay the same is like 37 minutes. I don't think they stay for longer than that. And then there's a lot of information underneath the arrows that will likely change. So the arrows, they're not actually called the arrows. They're called the variables or the 4 transformations. So I remember when I was new to human design and I was Googling, like, what are the arrows? And it was hard to find stuff because they're not called arrows, they're called variables. And 4 transformations because there's 4 of them, so there's 4 steps. And this idea being that transformation is possible after strategy and authority. It really helps you to align with what is correct for you in each stage of transformation. So when we're looking at the arrows, there are two basic binaries and there are 16 total combinations. So the arrows are either going to point left and right. These are the binaries. I'm going to do my best to not say the word right outside of the context of the direction right for the arrows because I say it a lot, but there are two binaries, left and right, when it comes to this, and then 16 different combinations because there are 4 arrows. So where do the arrows come from? There's a few different levels to this. On the surface level, the arrows are related to this first arrow here, to your personality, or, oh my gosh, I forgot to fix this. Sorry, this should say design, and this should say personality, my bad. So the unconscious side, the design side, this first arrow here is called, or sorry, is related to your design or your unconscious sun earth. And the second arrow is related to the nodes on the unconscious side. The third arrow is related to the nodes on the conscious side, and the fourth arrow is related to the nodes on the sun earth on the conscious side. However, what they're really coming from is underneath that. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with substructure, but this is actually what happens underneath the gates and the lines. So here we can see that we have the sun in 62.2. And underneath, so we have the gate, right? There's 64 gates. Underneath each gate, there are 6 lines. Underneath each line, there are 6 colors. I sometimes hate the language that human design uses. I wish it wasn't called a color because it doesn't make sense in my brain, but that's okay. There are 6 colors. And then underneath the colors, there are 6 tones per color. And underneath the tones, there are 5 bases per tone. So there's all of these different levels or substructures below the gates. And arrows come from something called tone. So it's not the gate, it's not the line, it's not the color, it's the tone that decides whether the arrow is left or right. So if you are tone 1, 2, or 3, it'll pull your arrow left. And if you are tone 4, 5, and 6, it'll pull your arrow right. And so when you're asking about this idea around like how quickly do they change, in terms of math, which isn't necessarily accurate because there's, planetary movements and stuff like this, there's retrogrades and whatever, although I don't know that retrogrades actually apply in this instance because we're talking about, well, they do for the nodes. Anyways, so it depends on, it takes each gate is going to be there for almost 6 days. And so each line is going to be almost a day, not a full day. And so each color is going to be, whatever 24 hours is divided by, it's not quite 24 hours, let's say like 23 hours divided by 6, and then divide that by 6. So it ends up being about, I think, 37 minutes when I did the math for the sun earth ones. And then it'll change for the nodes because those take a lot longer to go around. So there's just a lot of variability for how long they are. I really recommend only playing around with the arrows if you are confident on your birth time, especially when it comes to the deeper part of the arrows, like your diet, your environment, these kinds of things, because you might be making some pretty major decisions for yourself that aren't actually accurate. So I just like to put that out there. Strategy and authority is always like good, it's solid. If you know your strategy and authority, this stuff can be fun to play with, but I just kind of caution against it. Use your strategy and authority to see if it's right for you to experiment with. So the variable grid, this was something that drove me absolutely bananas when I first started looking at it for a few different reasons. So I'm going to show you just the top row of the grid, and it looks something like this. So like I said, there are 4 arrows and there's 16 combinations. So this is 4 of the 16. And when you look at the grid, there are combinations of letters. Like around the top, we have PLL, PLR, PRL, PRR. And essentially what it is the L is obviously left, the R is right, and the P stands for personality, which is the conscious side of your design. And then the design is the unconscious side of it. So you'll have, for example, the design DLL, that means design left, left. So the unconscious arrows, so these ones here are going to be left. So when you look across the grid in this row, every one of these is going to be on the design side, left, 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 right? Right. God, I hate it when I do that. Just in this context, because it makes it confusing. So again, if we look at the full grid, you can see that this entire row is going to be DLL, so design left, left. This entire row is going to be design left, right. This whole row is going to be design right, left, and then design right, right. And then when we look down on the personality side, each column, so for example, this column is going to be personality left, right. So it's, you know, each of the personality side is going to be left, right. So when you're looking at that, this is just kind of a helpful way of understanding. And when you see people that say like, oh, my variable are like DLR, PLR, let's say, that's mine. So here I have DLR, here I have PLR, and they intersect here. So these are my variables. And then I've made slight amendments to the language talking about the variables because I find it's not the easiest to understand. And so I say that this top arrow here is going to be about the mind. Technically, this is about the brain, but it's an active mind or a passive mind, depending on what your variable is. And then this next one is a relaxed body or an active body. And this one here, we're going to have a wide view versus a focused view. And up here, we have strategic awareness versus receptive awareness. Let me just turn on my little mouse thing to make it easier to see where I'm pointing. So when you're looking at the grid, it just helps you to get an understanding. And the way that it goes with the grid is that it goes from top to bottom on the left side and then top to bottom on the right side. So looking at this example, DLL, PLR. And if you're familiar with the sort of 4 transformations part of it, it's a little bit annoying because the way that you say this, like DLL, PLR, is a different order than what the transformations actually go in. So here it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, but the 4 transformations go 1, 2, 3, 4, which we'll get to. But that was something, again, I found so confusing when I was first learning it because it was like, what? This doesn't make sense. I don't understand. So just to make that a little bit more clear. So when we're looking at this grid overall, you'll notice that this top square is all left facing, and the left very much has to do with our past. Gwen says your chart is better than any I've seen. Thank you, Gwen. I spent way too much time working on this because it just is hard to look at, I find. So I wanted to make it a little bit more available, I don't know, easier to look at than a lot of the human design graphics seem to be. So this top square here, this is all left facing. And then this bottom right is all right facing. And so if you kind of follow the diagonal here, this is sort of coming from the past and moving to the future. And so human design really has this perspective that the all left is very much tied to our ancestry and our history and our past. And the all right is very much tied to our future and where we're going. So yeah, let me know in the chat if you know what your letters are. So Romina just says, I'm DRR PRL. Dallas says I'm all left. Very cool. Rebecca, I'm DLL PRL. Maria, I'm a quad right. Very cool. Yeah, so lots of different configurations. Amazing. Nancy says, I have no idea. No problem, Nancy. It's a little bit confusing at first, but you can maybe bring up your chart at some point and have a look at it. And if you're still trying to figure it out later, send me a message on Instagram or an email or something. So Patricia says, how can someone be a manifestor and have an active body? Yeah, you know, there's always going to be these kind of conundrums or these what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, oppositions, let's say, in human design, right? Where you could be a generator and be, or a manifesting generator even, and be quad right, where it's like you have all this sort of passivity. And people think like, well, aren't you supposed to be busy all the time and doing all the things? And you know, in a sense, so Maria says, I'm a quad right manifesting generator. Yeah, so go check out Maria, you know, because it can happen that way. And conversely, you could be a projector, you know, a no motor projector that's quad left, where it's like you have all this activeness, this active body, this whatever. it's possibility. And so there's always going to be, I think a lot of the things we see in design are sometimes overly simplified, which I'm not against because there's a lot of complexity in design. And sometimes we really do need to break it down. But we teach human design and we learn human design generally by breaking the pieces down. But it's not a broken down thing, it's a holistic thing. And so as you learn more of these pieces, they come together, and there's just, we're very multifaceted beings. We have all these different parts to us. Maria says, I've done a reading for a quad left projector. Yeah, totally. They absolutely exist, right? You said the arrows are more specific to us than the general type. Yeah, and they're all just, again, different aspects of us. And even when we talk about having an active body, which actually, you know what, I'll get to that point when I get to it, because I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. So anyways, this is the general grid. And another thing to note about the grid, which is interesting, is that so all of these top arrows in all of the rows, these are related to our sun and earth, right? If we go back to, why doesn't this want to go back? There we go. So if we go back here, these top arrows are related to our sun earths, and these bottom arrows are related to our nodes. And so the top arrows, again, is a little bit more about our minds, let's say, and the bottom arrows are more about our life and like this life theme that we live out. So when we look at this entire grid, we can actually find groups that we're going to resonate more with. And so, for example, like I said, I'm a DLR PLR, so this is my square here. And so my bottom arrows are both right facing. So I'm going to have a little bit more common ground with the DLR PRR, because again, we have these two bottom arrows, the quad rights that have the bottom arrows, and this one down here, which also have the bottom right arrows. So within the 16 combinations, there are these kind of families in between. Elisa says, samesies, I love that. So within these 16 combinations, there's kind of these 4 families that will have this common foundation of their nodes, or what are called independent variables. So the nodal variables, essentially. So there's going to be different groups there that, again, you just kind of come from the same place. It's like you're speaking the same language, although you might have different arrows on the top, your bottom arrows bring some commonality. Okay, I could talk a lot more about that, but let's move on. We're already 30 minutes into this. So leftness and rightness. Again, these are the basic binaries that we're going to have when it comes to the arrows. And so as a general way of looking at it, the left energy is strategic energy, it's active energy, it's yang. Some people will say it's masculine energy. So if that's language that resonates with you, go for it. If it doesn't, that's fine. It's very much about the past. It's where we've come from. And the idea with the left is that having a focus is everything, right? And I need to stop saying right. So having a focus is everything. And it's very much about the strategy and strategic energy being rooted in survival, while we're able to make a strategy and make a plan, and that has helped us survive, and that has helped us get to where we are in civilization, for better or for worse, depending on your perspective. And really the idea of Darwinism, survival of the fittest, that's strategic in a sense of like, there's winners or losers. Someone's going to win and someone's going to live, someone's going to die kind of thing. So there's sort of that energy involved of the past, of where we've come from and how we've survived. And strategy is also, if I do X, then Y. If I do this, then that's going to be the result. If I do this thing, then this is going to be the result. And so it's very strategic, similar to logical thinking, although it's not technically logic. And we currently are living in a world that's very much strategically organized. And Gwen says, like, consequences for actions. Yeah, 100%. That's very much strategic energy. And so currently our world is far more strategic than it is passive. And we're in a little bit of a shift right now. And that's something that sort of happens as we go through this evolution of moving from the left to the right. And so Oh, my computer is going into dark mode, so everything just changes on me. So yeah, we live in a strategically organized world, so it's a little bit more catered to the left, to the strategic, and so it can be a bit more challenging, and it cannot be, depending on how you want to experience it, for predominantly right people, because we aren't currently in a right world. But again, like I said, the right, it's receptive, it's passive, it's relaxed, it's about that yin energy, it's moving towards the future. It's really designed to be in the flow, it's designed to be relaxed, it's designed to be present in the now, as opposed to strategizing about what happened and how this is going to affect the future. They are potentially the most creative and the most aware people, but they don't always know it because we have this left world that we're in. So they might not understand their strengths in terms of their awareness. They're really here to take in everything, and they're here to be a resource that others draw from in a way that feels really good. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. It's so important for right beings to find a medium for your creativity. And when I say creativity, I don't necessarily mean art or music. There's creativity in anything that we do, but it's really about finding a medium for that, because that's going to have a big impact on your life. So the arrows overview, let's get into them. When we're looking at the arrows, like I mentioned, they're also called the for transformation. They're technically called variables. And so they go in this order. This is the first one up here, the second, the third, and the fourth. And here's what they represent. So the first one is digestion or mind, and it's really around digestion or feeding our actual brain, which we'll talk about in a bit. And we have the second one is environment, the third one is perspective, and the fourth one is awareness. So I am going to preface this just by saying I don't necessarily know how I feel about the first arrow. So the first arrow is all about digestion. It's about feeding your brain. And as someone who has a history with disordered eating, coming from a culture where so many people have a unhealthy relationship to food, I'm very hesitant to I don't recommend this for anybody. If it is correct for you, according to your strategy and authority, have at it. You know, you are a adult responsible for your own life. Do what you're going to do. And so Dallas says, why are three arrows facing left? Dallas, if you're talking about my example, it's just a screenshot of what it was. We're going to go through them all as we go through them. Yeah, no problem. And so just as a preface, again, if this is correct for you according to your strategy and authority, go for it. If it feels limiting to you, if it feels wrong to you, if it feels anything other than good, ignore it. So I just want to preface it with that. We're not going to be going into the details of digestion today, just the overall view of it, but just if you do decide to go deeper, those are my thoughts on it. So digestion is really talking about the type of mind or the type of brain that you have, whether it's active or passive. And it's how you're designed to feed your mind. And when we talk about feeding your mind, part of what we're talking about is food, and part of what we're talking about is everything else that feeds our mind in terms of information and stimulation, right? So it's about the conditions or the circumstances of how you eat. It's not so much what you eat. And this is again where I have feelings about this. I don't really believe, you know, Ra would say that you could eat a Big Mac every day for every meal. And if it was under the right digestion for you, so for example, my digestion is called hot thirst. So I'm supposed to be consuming things that are warmer than my body temperature, essentially. So in theory, I could eat a hot Big Mac every day and be healthy. I don't agree with that. I'm not saying that it's true or not. I don't know. I just doesn't feel right for me. I don't have the urge as a manifestor to go after that, and do what you want to do. The idea being, again, with digestion, that it's not about what you eat, it's the conditions or circumstances surrounding that is going to nourish you correctly. It's also very much not about losing weight. It's about feeding your brain for your optimal awareness. And so again, I just like to say that because there's some people I find in the Instagram world that maybe share about it slightly differently. Yeah, Gwen says, my design indicates I'm cold thirst and I love hot beverages. Yeah, you know, and so I'm very much a proponent of do what feels right for you. And if this is not something that feels correct for you, then screw it, you know. I very much relate to hot thirst. I hate cold food. I hate cold water. I literally drink, like, my water bottle is full of warm water. That's just what I like. So I very much relate to mine, and I'm still like, I don't know about this. And you know, like I said, you do you. So, Martha, I see that you raised your hand. I feel free to type a question in the box if you have a question about things, and we'll get to it. So again, this is really only something that you're designed to do if it's right for you according to your strategy and authority. And Ra himself says that this is not going to be right for most people. So if it feels right for you, amazing, go for it. If it doesn't, chill, no problem. So again, the two basic binaries when it comes to digestion are active if you're left or passive if you're right. And so we are going to dive into them. Also, I would like to point out my lovely diagrams here. I hope they're helpful for you. So there's going to be a circle around whatever arrow we're talking about it if you get lost or confused or anything, or if you're not sure which one I'm talking about. And as you'll see on the next slide, there will be an arrow pointing the specific direction in that spot if I'm talking about a specific arrow. So Satya says, why is it a thing if it isn't accurate for most people? Satya, I'm not saying that it's not accurate for most people. I'm saying it's not correct for most people, according to Ra. And by correct, I mean that it's not right for you to do in your life. It isn't that it's not accurate for them. And this is, again, according to human design, make up your own decisions about how you feel about this for yourself. But but it's not about it being correct as in like yours is going to say hot thirst when really you're cold thirst, but I mean correct in terms of like, is it actually right for you to take this step in your life and experiment with it? Or is, you know, Ra says that strategy and authority is basically what most people are going to do with human design, and that's good. And some people are going to, it's going to be correct for them to go deeper into it and to experiment with the PHS, with digestion, with the arrows, with all the stuff, but it's not going to be the right thing for most people to do. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of that. And Gwen says, curious, if you're hot thirst, for example, how do you translate that into how you digest food? Or sorry, how you digest info. So it's a bit more of an environmental thing in terms of how you digest information. But again, I don't want to get into the specifics below the arrows really today, because there's just, again, we would be here for a long time going into all of them. And so Satya, yeah, it's going to be a deeper level of it. There's I'm not sure. I'll come back to it at the end of where you can find that information because it's kind of below the area. It's not on my body graph. Yeah, no problem. So if you have a left digestion or an active mind, you have an active mind that's designed to be fed regularly. So when it comes to food or information, again, fasting is not ideal for you. Your mind or your brain needs constant fuel, and it needs constant activity and stimulation. And your brain is designed to be busy. So it's something to note here when you think about the open head, because so many people have open heads, you know, 70% of us do. You can really fall into the not self with this arrow of the thinking about things that don't matter, right? And because it's like your brain's designed to be busy, it always wants to be thinking about things, and you can really go off the rails of thinking about things that don't matter, myself included. I very much am relating to this as well. I see a bunch of you are too. And if the brain isn't well fed, it's said that it can create a lot of physical problems. So if you're not feeding yourself, if you're not stimulating yourself mentally, intellectually, it can create, you know, headaches, backaches, these other issues in your life. So intellectual stimulation, very important for this arrow, as well as regularly feeding your brain. If you have a passive mind or a right-facing arrow, your mind is designed to passively take in everything. It's not correct for you to try to focus or to be under pressure to focus. It's designed to really just take it all in and to be a resource for others to draw on. And when the right people, and sorry, I'm going to say when the correct people for you are in your life as a passive mind, they will draw out the correct things and it will feel good for you. So it's like you're a resource, you're like an oracle almost. And your experience is really going to depend on the people around you and the questions they're asking you and the information they're pulling out of you. Because you're so receptive and passively taking things in, you often don't even know what you know until someone asks. And then it's like, oh, wow. So if people in your life aren't asking good questions, Gwen says, so me. Yeah, I find it so fascinating because this isn't me. But oh, Romina says, so me with my business coach. Yeah, very cool. And so your life is really, really going to be dependent on having the correct people around you that ask the right questions, that draw the right things out of you, because you have so much. You're a massive resource. But if you have people around you that aren't using you in a good way, it's not going to feel good. You might feel like you're not smart. You might feel like you don't know anything when that's absolutely not the case. Yeah, Deborati says, oh, wow, I resonate so much to this. Yeah, so cool. I love it. Patricia, that's why I feel like a hoarder of information. Absolutely. Yeah, you're just always taking things in. And so with this, your mind is designed to be more relaxed and to be in flow. And so it doesn't need as constant fuel as left minds does. You know, when you think of calorie expenditure, when your mind's really busy and constantly active, you're using a lot of energy. So you need to be fed more, versus if you have a right mind, it's just kind of relaxed, it's passive, it's allowing things in. So it doesn't need the same amount of calories or the regular feeding. Let's say, I don't want to bring calories into this specifically. You're also very sensitive to the frequencies beyond what we normally sense. And so human design really talks about how the right passive mind is taking things in holographically. So it's beyond what we think of as regular vision or regular hearing or regular senses. And it's like you're taking in the frequencies below things. So you're so much more sensitive to things that we aren't even necessarily aware that we're sensitive to. Okay, so moving on to the second arrow of environment. Everyone has a correct environmental place. It's not a specific location, but it's about the qualities of the environment. And the right environment the correct environment for you will bring about the correct relationships, which will remove the impact of the so-called wrong auras and the wrong people. So if you're in a place that's good for you, you're going to have relationships that are good for you. You're going to have a lot more ease. Everything, it just kind of works out a lot better. I will also mention that this is something that's generally taught that is important once you reach your Saturn return, or around the age of 30, 27 to 30, something like that, depending on where your Saturn is. And so if you want, I have some students that were asking me about using this with their kids. And it's like, listen, if your strategy and authority tells you to use this with your kids, cool. And it's really meant for people once they cross the Saturn return, which, like I said, is around the age of 30. So don't worry about it if you're like, oh no, this isn't the right, environment. If you want to try and use this, again, use your strategy and authority to what feels correct for you, and don't worry about it if it's not possible, let's say. And the idea with environment is it really nourishes you from the outside, like diet nourishes you from the inside. Human design, when they talk about this, they call the environment observed, which means active, or observer, which is passive. So I just use the terms active body and relaxed body because I think it's a little bit more clear. But if you're looking in human design elsewhere and it's saying observed and observer, that's what it's talking about. What else did I want to say about environment? When it comes to environment, so if you learn about your environment a little bit more specifically, sometimes we might try to manipulate it to be in the right environment. And again, use your strategy and authority. So for example, my environment is kitchens dry. So living in a city that is not humid is technically something that's correct for me. And I, for a period of time, lived in Calgary. It's a city, it's very dry. And it was a incredibly miserable time for me. Now, that being said, maybe that was correct because the miserableness led to some sort of catalyst and transformation and blah, 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 blah. But there's a lot that goes into it. And again, use your strategy and authority about the right place and not forcing the right place to happen. And Patricia, so you said you're natural shores, maybe Toronto is not the best place. I go down to the shore every day almost. I live in not too far away from the lake, so I go down all the time. So there's definitely that aspect. And there's a lot of ways to create environments that aren't in the sort of obvious place for environments. So again, don't worry too much. It's not like you have to pick up and move to an island. And maybe it is correct for you to do that. Again, strategy and authority all the way. Okay, so when we talk about a left environment, left is all about taking action, and your environment is a place that's designed to energize you. If your environment doesn't lead you to be active, it's not the correct environment for you. And this is someone that's really designed to be physically busy. But I want to sort of make a caveat there that it's not necessarily about running around, although it could be. You know, you could be sitting and playing an instrument or painting or like typing and working. That's still active to a degree. And often with this environment, people will tell you to slow down and rest, but you're here to be active. Gwen says, I'm mountains. I love the top level of the buildings and sitting in balconies and watching everything from above. Yeah, totally. That makes a lot of sense for mountains. And so if you are a right environment, you are designed to have a relaxed body. So you're designed to be relaxed and comfortable in your environment. So, you know, if you get into an environment and you're just like, I'm just like ready to lounge and chill and relax, it's like perfect. That's a good environment for you. You know, get everybody else to bring you what you need and you can just relax in an ideal world, you know. So, in the correct environment, what you need will come to you. And if people are trying to get you out of the flow in your environment, it's not the right one for you. You're designed to have a relaxed body that's laid back. It's not about being lazy, although, you know, it can look like that sometimes, but you're really being the observer, you know, people watchers all the way here, taking in your environment, and your life is designed to come to you when you're in the correct environment. It's not about doing nothing, but it's really about allowing yourself to receive life. So it's not pushing. When I was teaching this class yesterday, one of my students had this example of environment where the active environment, if you use, her name is Sloan, by the way, just to give her credit. If when you're talking about environments, it's like the active environment is playing the game and the receptive or the relaxed environment is watching the game, right? So it's like there's a game playing. Are you the player or are you the watcher, right? Yeah, awesome. Okay, cool. So going on to perspective. So here we are down at this third arrow, and perspective is very much about how we see things, right? This is our perspective. Is it focused or is it wide? I use the term wide. Human design generally uses the term peripheral. Honestly, I use wide because it was hard to fit peripheral in the arrow, but same idea. If you don't have access to your correct perspective, then the mind cannot be correct. And again, remember, you can't have the right perspective if you're not digesting correctly or if you're in the wrong environment. So these arrows, the four transformations, they build on each other. And, you know, I went on a bit of a tangent yesterday talking about this in terms of manifestation, because a lot of people have learned about this arrow telling them that they're either a specific, focused, or a non specific manifester. And I'm not saying that that's not true. I certainly have not learned everything in the world that there is to learn about design. It would take me, I'm sure, 20 years to get through absolutely everything. So maybe there is something somewhere. Maybe someone channeled something new about this. I'm not here to hate on that, but I also don't know that that's actually correct. And it's, again, doing what feels good for you. So when it comes to this whole concept of manifesting, if it feels good for you to have this idea of being specific or non-specific, cool. And you don't need to feel limited about that. So let me talk about the arrows a little bit, then I'll get into this a bit more. So if you are a focused view or if you have a left perspective, you are designed to have that narrow sort of tunnel vision focus. You look at the world and you only see what you see. So this can be challenging sometimes, because if you're not in the correct environment for you, then you're not going to be seeing the correct thing. Your focus can be elsewhere. And often when you're in the not self, like a lot of us are, especially if we're new to human design, we often make up stories for why we're seeing things. So if we're seeing something that we don't like, that doesn't work for us, it's like, oh, well, it's because I'm stupid, and it's because I should have gone to this school and I did this and I married the wrong person and blah, 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 blah. When actually, no, you're just in the wrong place. So you're looking at the wrong thing. It's not that there's anything wrong with you. You just need to be in a different environment to have a different view. And this is a very powerful perspective to help you align to something because you have that level of focus. And like I said, if you're in the wrong environment, you might be focusing on the wrong thing because you don't have the right view. And so this is where strategy and authority is so, so, so helpful. And sometimes I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm such a human design nerd harping about strategy and authority. But it really is helpful because if you are focused on the wrong thing or something that's not correct for you, then strategy and authority can really help you get back on the correct track for you. And this is where, I tell people all the time when I teach strategy and authority that it often doesn't make sense. You think you want something, you think you're going for something. You're like, why isn't it showing up? Why is my strategy or why is my authority telling me, no, this is what I want? It might not be the right thing for you, or it might be the wrong time. And so again, tying in this conversation to what I was talking about a little bit before with manifesting, is we often manifest from our not self. And so when you think about that, when you think about your openness, some of the really common ones, let's say you have an open heart, right? About half of us do. And so you're trying to prove your worthiness. You're trying to prove that you have value. And so are you trying to manifest a certain type of business, a certain type of life, a certain job to prove to someone, to the world, that you have this value? Or is it really truly what is correct for you? And so again, strategy and authority can be really helpful as opposed to focusing on this idea of like, oh, I'm a specific manifester, so I'm going to focus specifically on what it is that I want, because what you want might not actually be what is in the highest good for you. And so strategy and authority, again, can really help with that realigning. My thoughts, anyways. So when we talk about the right perspective, you have a wide view, so wide or peripheral, and you see everything and you take in everything. And sometimes you see things that others don't see. So this can be a little bit tricky because we live in a strategic world. People want proof, they want strategy, and they think you're weird because they're like, well, what do you mean you saw this thing? And what are you talking about? And you can't always necessarily explain it because it's not always like, it's not always obvious, but it's like, you see what's going on. I didn't share this example yesterday and I might regret sharing it today. But for example, a certain relationship that I was in, the person that I was with was having an affair. And I didn't technically know at the time, but I knew. And I think about that and like, I swear it was like, because I was friends with the person that my partner at the time was having an affair with. And when I was around the two of them, it was just like, so my for some background information, my high school boyfriend had a similar situation where he was cheating on me with a friend. Has some healing to do around that, so it doesn't keep repeating itself, obviously. But when I was around my more recent partner and this person that he was having an affair with, all I could think about was my high school boyfriend and this girl that he cheated on me with. And it was weird because I'm in my 30s, so high school was a very long time ago. I don't ever think about that anymore. But it was like all I could think about. And I think about this in terms of perspective, and it's like, right, you take in so much information. I'm sure it was like the tones of their voice and how it changed, and the like the little looks here and there, and how the energy was different, right? And so even though I didn't have something specific to be like, well, I know you're having an affair because this, but it's just like, I know that this is happening. I don't have any proof yet. I eventually got it. I don't have any proof, but I know that this is happening, right? And so this is an example to me of that peripheral sort of awareness. And I mean, to a degree, there's other things that go into it, right? Our intuition. Yeah, Gwen says the body usually knows before the mind, totally. And I think that's a big part of human design is the strategy and authority really, for the most part, lives in the body, and really being able to trust that instead of our mind, which, listen, our mind is so great at collecting information and processing data, right? But it's not always the best at knowing things or making decisions. So when you have the right perspective or the peripheral or wide view, if you try and focus on a specific thing, it doesn't always work. So it's really about taking in the whole picture and having that relaxed view. So awareness. This is our fourth arrow, and this is an arrow that I find people are the least likely to relate to because, again, we are building. This is our fourth one, and so we often aren't possibly ever going to get to this stage of relating. And some of us will, some of us won't. There's no right, wrong, better, whatever. It's just what's correct for us or not. Um, However, our awareness is really about our mind. It's about learning, it's about data collection, and it's very much about a style of processing data or processing this information. So that it's conscious awareness that you are the passenger who gets to enjoy the ride in this lifetime. And you can really release yourself from the mind, trying to control and manipulate your life, and instead share your wisdom. So, this arrow of awareness is related to the concept of outer authority in human design. So, this idea that you can be an authority for someone else when you're not in your own not self. Sue says this keeps freezing so much. Um, the powers that be don't want you to learn. No, I totally disagree. You can catch the replay for sure, and it'll be smoother for you, Sue. So here, when we're talking about awareness, we have strategic awareness or we have receptive awareness. So if you have this arrow facing left, it's very much about awareness that is survival oriented. When we talk about that outer authority, which again, Ra sort of has this perspective that we're rarely ever going to get to this awareness level of being able to express outer authority. But anyways, so it's really this strategic awareness and conceptualization. And if you're in the not self, there's a pretty good chance that you're using strategy to compensate for the not self aspects of you. So again, like using the example of the heart center, right? If you're in the not self of that and you're using strategy of like, okay, if I get this job and if I do this thing and if I do that thing, then I'm going to be blah, blah, blah. And then I'm going to be worthy. And if I do this, then I'm going to be better than this person. So I'm going to win and they're going to lose and I'm going to be worthy and they're not. And so strategy can really kind of jump in with like the ego and try to make us compensate for things. It's not only about the ego, but in that example. So often when you have this awareness, you have all of these backup plans and all of these contingency plans. And, to put the conversation back to the whole manifestation, this can be tricky sometimes because if you're constantly preparing for things to potentially go wrong, that can be tricky if you're trying to manifest something. And again, when we think about the past and the survival orientation, that's how we survived, right? Was knowing all of the 27 possible backup plans so that we can survive, so that our species is able to survive. So it's not bad, it's just not always helpful for where we are. And the sort of high expression again of this awareness is allowing yourself to be the passenger, to see the mind without buying into the doing of the things you're thinking about. Yeah, Gwen says this is me. Plus, I'm a fourth line being, meaning I have to have a contingency for everything. Yeah, totally. I'm also a fourth line, so I relate to that. So if you have a receptive awareness or a right fourth arrow, you are designed again for that receptive awareness, to take it all in, to have the correct things drawn from your mind, to have the right data drawn from you, the right conceptualizations drawn from you. And again, really just wanting to emphasize strategy and authority here, because it's not about focusing and using your mind to be strategic. It's about being relaxed, being passive, letting life come to you, and allowing your body or your authority to really guide you, as opposed to strategy in the mind. And it's really, really, really important, again, with this arrow, with all of the rightness, honestly, to be present. So those are the 4 arrows. Did you learn something new? Let me know in the chat how you're all doing. So he said, yes, sure did. Was the best course I've taken on variables. Oh, thanks, Gwen. Can totally relate to this. When I'm out with clients, being present is crucial throughout my best capacity. Yeah. Maria says, yes, thank you. Amazing. Love the rabbit hole. Yes, Nancy. Human design is a never-ending rabbit hole. Oh, thank you, Dallas. He said, that's amazing. Okay, awesome. I'd love to share a little bit about HD School. If it's okay with you, let me know in the chat. I was planning on opening the doors to HD School. I'm going to postpone that a little bit. I'm going to get some rest first, but I'll share with you a little bit. So HD School is my online course. It is a 16-week course, essentially, to help you learn the human design system. I'm adding new classes right now on Variable, on the PHS system, just so that if you do want to go into that deeper level, you have the ability there to be supported with that. And we go through really everything in HD School, from the kind of very basic foundational stuff, like I said, more to the depth like we're talking about now, although of course we're going to go deeper into Variable in HD School than we did in this 1 hour. But really, my motivation behind HD School was creating a program where I learned or creating a program that I wish I learned from, essentially. When I was learning human design, I found it so frustrating sometimes. The classes were so repetitive. It's like there was hours and hours and hours of them, and like the first however many, like 25 minutes in each class would be going over stuff we've already learned before, and it just drove me insane. So I really wanted to create something that was upbeat, that was positive. Some of the stuff I found to be so disempowering. And so, anyways, I created HD School. If this is something that feels like it resonates with you, you can get on the wait list here. It's at sortofspiritual.com/waitlist. You'll be notified when I do decide to open the doors sometime soon. And if you have any questions about what we covered or about HD School, let me know in the chat, send me a DM. I'm always pretty open to that. Yeah, Gwen, let me, we talked about this a little bit, so I'll send you a DM in terms of like scholarship opportunities. And I definitely, I appreciate trying to build new skills. And I think this would be cool to bring to Native American communities as well. So I very much appreciate you asking. Sue says, it's so funny you're doing this webinar right now because I literally just got introduced to digestion and environment last week. Yeah, it's a fun rabbit hole to go down for sure. Thank you all for being here. Do you have any other questions before we finish? Oh, Martha says, I love HD School. I've been in it since January. Highly recommend Katie's guidance. Thanks, Martha. I love having you in the community. You're such a light. Lisa, thanks so much. I'm realizing how much I relate to my design, but I fought against it because it's not what the world tells me I should be. Yeah, totally. Elisa, I'm pretty sure you said you're a generator, right? And I know there's, and so there's so much conditioning. It's like the irony of everyone in the world being conditioned to be a manifester except for manifestors, right? So there's just, it's a wild experience. Awesome. Oh, thank you, Nancy. I appreciate that. Okay, well, I'm going to end it here then. Thank you so much for making it and for joining. I really appreciate you joining me for this class, especially after the tech struggles I've been having this week. And I hope you all have a lovely day, a lovely evening, whatever it is, in whatever part of the world you're in. And thanks for joining. I will be sending out the replay, providing everything works. And I will see you all soon. Bye.